Welcome to our episode number 3. Today we're going to be talking about more theory. Yes,
Yes.
we like talking about those, right? Um, so today we're going to talk a little bit about philosophy, approaches, methodologies, framework. What is all that? So, do you want to talk a little bit before we start?
No, just want to say hello. And I think the theory is very important because we don't spend much time talking about it. And it's changing so much. So it's good to just go back, revisit, see what they mean, and how we are actually, how it actually impacts our practice
hmm
in the classroom.
I think revisiting is a good word, right? Because
Yep.
if we just don't go back, then we actually forget what they
Yeah,
are.
and
And
even we were talking before starting, it's like, okay, so let's go over all the things, all the words that we usually say and say, okay, what is this? Is this an approach? Is this a theory? Is this like, what is this? Like, we know them, but we have to go back and revisit. So we really understand where they are and how they are influencing us on our daily practice.
yeah. So I think we should start with philosophy because that is the
Yep.
top, let's say,
Yep.
or the base, depending on how you see
Yeah.
it, right? Because the philosophy is the theory. It's more of the
Yep.
theoretical part of teaching. So when you think about a school, the school has to follow a philosophy, has to know why they want to teach and why they want the students to learn and what their beliefs are. So we have several different examples of philosophies of education. Um, we just need to understand that it's the why, and it has to do with things that are not necessarily thought to education. They are
Hmm.
related to things that are the development of the society, the development of the human beings, and
Yep.
all of that. Should we talk about our experience in the different kinds of philosophies?
I think we can kind of like just give examples of what those philosophies are and who are the people that write about it, or what do we use as examples.
hmm So I think that the one, at least in Brazil, I think this is the top philosophy. That is constructivism, right?
Hmm.
So it's hands on. It has to do with problem solving. It has to do with an active construction of knowledge. So we have several different schools in Brazil, and some of the ones we worked at
Yes.
follow constructivism. So they see the learner as an active part of the learning process. So it's more of
Yes.
learning and less of teaching.
Yes, it's
Right.
like it's the one that you would get to that school and they would say, well, teacher talking time is like 5 minutes, and the rest of the 40 minutes it's student led. So it's when the children are part of it, they discuss, they bring ideas, they question, and the teacher works more as a facilitator in the process of the learning of the children.
Yeah. Another philosophy would be humanism or holistic.
Hmm.
Holistic is more of the way they use for the approach, but
Yep.
humanism is when you're not considering only the academics, but mainly the emotional and social development of the students, right? So you have a huge emphasis on the emotional and social development, and the academics are just a
Plus, it comes
consequence.
with it.
It
Yep.
comes with it.
I
Sorry.
have an example about this one, not as a teacher, but as a mom, and I think it goes a lot like in preschools or
hmm
um, how do we call them in Brazil? The lower grades, like from 2 to 5. I would say. I think that's the age where this is very common, because there
Hmm.
are lots of schools that focus on developing children social emotional when they are very young.
Yeah.
So as a mom, like that's where my daughters went when they were little. It was a place that would focus on that. So the activities were a lot about like um, music, or like those kids games or the dances that they played together, and there were a lot of activities where they were learning about feelings and whatnot.
Another one is the critical pedagogy. So it has to do with how education can transform society. So it has to do with social justice, it has to do with transformation. So I think this is one of the ones that receive more critique
Hmm.
because it has to do with the outside, not the inside.
Hmm.
So it prepares students for the
Hmm.
world, and usually they manage the curriculum and the methodologies and the approaches just thinking that it's preparing them for life. It's not
Hmm.
um, just the content.
Academics. Yep.
It's not just
Yep.
academics, right? So we have one very good example here in Portugal, that is Escola da Ponte. That is, it's clear, it's obvious that they are thinking about education as a transformation to
And nobody
society.
knows about Escola da Ponte here in the United States. I try to tell them, nobody knows. Well, very few people know about Reggio either, but it's like it's so beautiful the way they build the learning in
Yeah.
there. And like, why isn't it more spread out? Like, why aren't people talking more about that? It's insane.
But here in Portugal, it's not accepted as well.
Really?
It's not well accepted. It was funny because I went there to visit two times already, and both
Oh gosh.
times the majority of teachers that were visiting were from Brazil, some from South America,
Hmm.
and that was it. I think in one of the visits there was a North American, no, a Canadian. It was a Canadian teacher,
Okay.
but that was it. And here, when we talk about with other teachers and all, they go like, "No, but why are you talking about Escola de Ponte? That is just an idea of a crazy man that went to Brazil
Hmm.
to see if he could do it more often
Hmm.
and in more places." But it's incredible the way they run the school, the way the students are owning their learning. It's impressive. We can talk more about that at another
Yeah, and I think we can
time.
put the website on our post just
Yeah,
so people can
know a little
look at it,
bit. Yeah,
get curious, and understand, just see what we're talking about.
yeah.
But it's beautiful.
And yes, in Brazil, we also have some other examples of critical pedagogy. We have an important theorist, theorist that was Paulo Freire, right? And his work is also amazing. And I'm impressed at how in the US, it's one of the core studies, right? You have to
Yes.
study him. And in Brazil, it's not that common. You know
Yeah,
him,
but I believe,
but
yeah, I believe there's some political aspect in it too, because and the colleges here are mostly private, right? So then they can conduct and actually research. Like the research here is beautiful. I have a lot of criticism about U.S. Education somehow, but I love the research and uh, how the colleges here encourage the academics and people researching about all the areas, right? But
yeah.
in education, it's beautiful. There are so many different areas that you can specialize in, and you can just like learn. So I think Paulo Freire is one that it's pointed in a lot of the courses, but not in the not the undergrad. I
It's
think it
more of.
gets deeper, yeah, when you go to graduation, to the get graduate school.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Um, I think there's another one that is essentialism, that is more of thinking of the core skills and knowledge that students should um, learn.
Hmm.
So it's more of content driven,
Based. Hmm.
right?
Okay.
It's more of a traditional um, philosophy. Um, let's talk a little bit about our experience with
Well,
those.
yes, I think before we go there, and I want to talk about the science of reading that we were discussing. What is the science of reading?
Yeah.
And I've been to a couple of trainings, and here in the US, the science of reading has become like this huge thing, right? Like it's changing the way literacy is taught from kindergarten to 12th grade. Um, but they, every time you do a training or every time you go there, they say science of reading is not a teaching approach. Science of reading is a theory. So the science of reading is the studies of how the brain learns how to read. And then once the teacher has the knowledge of how the information gets to our brain and how it translates to reading, then you can make decisions about the best approaches for teaching it. So I believe it would come in this category of philosophies.
Philosophy, yeah.
It's still something very new. I think it became this huge thing in the last maybe 5 years,
Yeah.
and more studies are coming out every year. Like there are some really cool books about it that we can also uh, bring more information about the science of reading, but they don't say that it's an approach.
Hmm.
They defend that it's a theory and it's to instruct teachers to become better teachers and to teach better by understanding how the human being learns how to read.
Yeah.
So I think it would go in there.
And I want us to have an episode about that because that's one of the things that I've been studying recently, and neuroscience and all of that, but that's for the future, not yet.
Yes.
Okay, now that we know that the philosophy is the theory, we need to
Mm-hmm.
go to the practical part, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the next step would be understanding what approaches are. So the approach is the style that the learning is going to happen, the style of teaching, the attitude of the teacher and the school, how they're going to approach the learning and the teaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
So um, these names are more present in the school grounds,
Yes.
right? So when we think about approaches, there are some specific names that we can mention, right? So Reggio Emilia is an approach. Um, some people put Montessori as an approach, but also a methodology because it gives
Yep.
you the the
How?
specifics, the strategies,
Yep.
and all, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Montessori is a mixture,
Mm-hmm.
but two sides here: student centered, teacher centered, right? So it makes a huge difference if you're a student centered approach or if you're a teacher centered approach. And if you are um, experienced with education, when you go
Mm-hmm.
into a classroom, you don't even need to talk to people, but if you go into a classroom, you will know if it's
Yes.
student centered or teacher centered, right? Because the
Yes.
way you organize the classroom, the way your students are doing things,
Mm-hmm.
it's
How
obvious.
responsible they are for their own learning, their own activities.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just a comment here, depending on the school, they don't have it clear,
Mm-hmm.
or they do, but then they're open to different ways of doing things.
Yeah,
So
I think I would say it's not clear, but it's not defined.
yeah.
I think like they don't define only one approach, because once you define one approach, then you have to abide by it. So
Yeah.
I think they might not define it. They might say we are inspired. And I had one example where I worked at it was a pre-K school, and I had just arrived here in the US, and I was super lucky. I thought I would never find a job in the US. And then I had this neighbor, and she was moving states, and then she's like, oh, I work at this school, like, do you want me to recommend you? I'm like, of course. So I go there, and it's this Catholic school. It was underneath the church, and I thought it would be very formal. There was this amazing principal there, and they were Reggio Emilia inspired.
Hmm.
So what it means is that, like, it's not that they were following the approach like 100%, because we did have like the Catholic class, and we did have like other parts that were like from the church or from where we were, but all the things that we would do in the classroom, and the way that we set up our classroom, the way that we would approach any learning was based on Reggio. So we would see one example would be like, and Reggio Emilia talks a lot about the environment as the third teacher.
Yeah.
So it's when you plan and you purposefully put there in their centers, in the environment, all the tools for them to learn from it,
Yeah.
right? So there's a lot of arts involved. So we would have a lot of nature artifacts. So we had a lot of like plants and things. Like they would make sandwiches. That we had like one area that was the cooking area, and they would just go outside, bring pine cones and whatever it was, and they would make like food out of it. Or we had the block center, the blocks where they were building all the things, but then even the blocks, they were like, they could become everything. So there
Hmm.
were all sizes, all weights on it. And we would put like, I don't know, sometimes there were just fabric around so they could make clothes for it. So it's like everything that you do in the classroom is very in intentional. So
Hmm.
you know what you were putting there and what you want the children to explore from it. But how they're going to explore from it, it's like whatever is in their mind.
It's
So
up to them.
like I had some like this huge blocks at some point, and then there was this kid in the classroom. Like one parent had donated, I think he was an arc dad, and he donated those rolls. Like they were huge, like
Okay.
huge rolls. And then one kid arrived in the classroom, and they're like, what is this? And I'm like, well, one parent donated. It's like, oh, it reminds me of the maze that I went the other day, because it was like Thanksgiving on season. And then all the kids were like, "Ooh, I love mazes. Do you know how to build a maze?" And then, well, I had planned to do something with apples. We ended up doing like building a maze around the classroom, and then they started writing the rules, because it's not everybody that was in the classroom. So they're like, "How are they going to know what to do? We have to write the rules for it." And so there was so much. Like I can tell you that I had no kid in that classroom that left my pre-K classroom without knowing numbers 1 to 100, without knowing all the letters of the alphabet, without knowing all the sounds of the alphabet. And not even one day I sat down and said, this is letter R. This is the sound of letter R.
Yeah.
But they all knew it. They
Hmm.
knew the letters of all of their names. They could write and sound out all of their friends' names.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is the approach that would, so this is one example. I love my experience there. So I'm so passionate about it.
No, and it's lovely to hear it because while you were describing it, I was thinking about some of the things that I did, and it was in a school that did not have a defined path to follow because
Hmm.
it was a traditional um, school. It was a Brazilian school, and they were implementing the bilingual project. So it
Hmm.
wasn't they didn't have a curriculum. They did not know. They didn't have standards. They were
Hmm.
still starting things
Fresh.
and
Yep.
thinking about what they would do. So it was awesome because I could experiment with things and try different things. And I remember that um, I had lots of different materials that I could use because I could go into any classroom, any
Mhm.
traditional classroom that they had from the morning curriculum and use in the afternoon. So I could use whatever material I wanted. So I remember once we were trying to think of a project related to food and different places. So
Mhm.
we had several different activities. One was we had a plane. We prepared a plane in the classroom, and
Mhm.
they had different roles. So one was the flight attendant, one was the pilot, one was the customer,
Mhm.
and they prepared everything. We had passports. We had lots of different things.
Uh-huh.
And one of the activities was related to food. So they got blocks and counters and different things, and they prepared the dishes.
The
And
plate full.
and I have pictures of it with like the jeans blocks. Tens were fries, and they had a big block that was part of a wooden set that was
Uh,
the cod, and they were representing food from Portugal, and it was so
Aw.
phenomenal, so beautiful. And it's funny because I told them these can be whatever you want, and
Mhm.
they went incredible. They went to all these
Yep.
different places. And anyways, let's go back. Otherwise, we're just going to keep on
Yes.
talking about different experiences, which
Yes.
is amazing as well. Uh, okay, so another way of thinking approaches is play based. So it's not so related to the resources that you give as radio, for example, but
Mhm.
it's based on playing. And that is an approach that is more common for early years and preschool,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
And then we have one that is, I might say, growing, that is
Mhm.
inquiry based. So when you have
Yes.
an approach that is inquiry based, it is a model of student centered, right? But you also have the moments of the teacher centered where
Teaching.
the teacher is going to be the one in charge of leading the learning, right?
Mhm.
Because you have to go from a starting point, you have the hook, you have the concepts that they have to learn. Um, and inquiry based, I think, is the one that is growing more recently.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I don't have information from
Data.
research or
Yeah.
anything, but that's my perception of approaches.
Mhm.
Okay, the next one is methodologies. So
Mhm.
you have the philosophy is going to inform the approaches, and the approaches will inform which methodologies you're going to use. Before we go into the specifics of the methodologies, I think it's important to understand that different approaches might use the same methodologies,
Yep.
but some methodologies don't fit in some approaches,
Mhm.
right? So, the methodologies are the strategies, the techniques, the way you're going to present the learning or the
Mhm.
teaching, right? So, several different examples here. So, we could think about project based. So, project based can be teacher centered and it can be
Yes.
student centered. Because, yeah, they have a project to follow.
Mhm.
Are we teachers going to give them all the steps? Or,
We can.
yes? Or are they going to think about what they want to do based on the things that we give them, right?
Yep. Can
Traditional
I
way.
make a comment on
Oh,
that
sure, sure,
before we go
please.
there?
Yeah.
Because I've had conversations with teachers where, like, we talk about project based, and they're like, "Oh no, we always have to be like making sure kids are engaged, that they're excited about the learning and blah, 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 projects or whatever it is. And I think there is a misconception when we talk about project based because at some point, maybe the discussion about kids being engaged and interested in learning uh, be, uh, became something like, oh, kids are happy in school, or kids are they are doing only what they want. And I don't think necessarily that's what it means. I believe it's not what it means. Um, but it's still a misconception, and there are still lots of teachers that when you say it's a project based or the children are going to choose the project, the teachers are like, oh, I'm going to let them research about Minecraft, or oh, I'm going to let them research about games, and that's what do you think they're going to learn from that? And I think it's important to, even if we decide what the project's going to be about, there's still room for it to be student centered. There's still room, like, on, I don't know, there was one time that we had this project on water, and it was amazing. Like, we just presented our ideas, like we put the kids in this room with a lot of um, everything they use water for, like floaties or cooking materials, whatever it was, but there was no water, and there was the sound of water, but there was no water. And then this was the provocation. And then after that, they came, so we knew that we were going to study water in different ways, but then they came up with the questions. They figured out what it was about. And every year we taught that project, because we always had to teach the same, like we always had the theme as the water for that unit. It would always be different. Like, we could use some experiences, some of the experiments that we would do related to science would still apply, or some, but the outcomes would be so different, and the kids' questions were different at the same time. So it's like, and that's the beauty about the project based. It's when you actually,
when is it
you can,
student centered?
yes, when it's student centered, but the teacher could just have the plan and go every year with the same structure, with the same methodology for that project, and then the outcomes would be pretty much similar.
Yeah.
But then they would not be that meaningful for the children, and the children might not be that engaged in the process. So being engaged does not mean having fun all the time. Being engaged does not mean that they're not going to sit down and read a text that you were giving them. So I think that's just a misconception that is nice just to bring to attention here.
To be honest, if it's completely teacher centered and the results are always similar, for me, it's not project based.
Yeah, agreed. Yep.
But that's just my opinion. Call it something else. Don't. Okay, it's a project based because there's going to be a project, something physical at the end. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyways,
agree.
Then we have the more traditional, that is direct instruction. So it's the teacher prepared, the teacher is going to be the one delivering it. There is some space for question and answer, right? But it's straightforward. The teacher is responsible for delivering the content,
the information. Yep.
Then we have another methodology that is cooperative learning. So in cooperative learning, you have the different roles. So each student has a specific job. They're responsible for doing one specific task while they're doing the group work. And you can use cooperative learning in project-based. You can use cooperative learning with other methodologies as well, because it's like you're giving the specific roles, but that can be used in any content and in any approach.
Yep.
Another one that is more recent is flipped classroom. So when you are giving them the content or some things to be done before the actual lesson happens, right? So you can give them the provocation and they do the research. And then when they come to the classroom, they're going to prepare other things. They're going to put the
Yep.
research into practice or something like that. Or it can be more theoretical and that's it. You
Yep.
so it's a direct instruction,
Mm-hmm.
but they
But
are
it's
supposed
flipped.
to do at their own pace and they have different materials and different resources, not just one
Mm-hmm.
way. Um, but that's what flipped classroom is. Then you have like learning stations or centers that is really common in early years and preschools in Brazil. We have
Yes.
lots of different schools with different approaches that use stations, right, and centers.
Yep.
And sometimes the learning stations are student centered, and sometimes they're not.
Yep.
They're completely like focused on the direct instruction that the teacher wants. They do
Yes.
not do anything different from what is there with the right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, you have visible learning. There's another approach where you are making sure that whatever learning is happening is not just here, right? It's not just
Yep.
inside the head of the learners. You're trying to give uh, strategies and different tools that they need to bring whatever is in here outside and
Out. Yep.
discuss and sharing and comparing and transferring. It's some
Yeah, and they
strategies.
become aware. I think the most thing, I think what I get the most about the visible thinking, um, it's making children aware of their own learning process,
Hmm.
and I really like it because it's very reflective,
Yeah.
and it's something that we lack a lot as teachers, is giving opportunities for children to reflect on their learning and where they're going from there. And I think the visible thinking gives those opportunities. There are so many strategies to reach it,
Yeah.
but it's always focusing on making sure that a child can put out what they're learning, can see what they're learning,
Hmm.
and can make the connections or even like assess like what the next steps are going to be.
Yeah. I think it's a really nice methodology, but you need to study it and then try
Yes.
one at a time because you need
Yeah.
to practice, practice, practice until you actually
Yes.
master
And
it
be consistent.
and be consistent and all of that. We use
Yep.
some of the visible learning strategies in the school that we work,
Yep.
that I work now. And there's one that we already know. It's simple, it's quick, everybody knows how to
Yes.
do it because it's used consistently throughout the grade
Throughout. Yep.
levels. Um, Another way that is also new is gamification, is another
Hmm.
methodology uh, where you're going to. It's Duolingo, right? Duolingo is gamification. You're
Yes. It's a kind of, yeah.
you're
The
thinking about
iReady, I think all the apps.
the rewards and how the next step is going to be. A lot of consistent retrieval practice and all of that,
Yep.
but in a way where they are in charge of their learning,
Hmm.
but there's a constant reward attached to it, right? It's
Yes.
easy for them to see where they're at and where they have to get and what they have to do in
Yep.
between, right?
Agreed. Hmm.
Um, should we go to just a quick explanation of framework and
I think it's going to be too much, don't you? I think there's a lot of information here and a lot of things that we unpacked. Um, and I think those three, like the framework, I think it's something that we can discuss later when we are going to lesson plans,
because it
because
affects
I
more
think they
of
are, yeah, I think they are somehow connected. And I do think like we can, we brought a lot of information here on the definition and a few examples on like how those approaches. But I think now I would like to ask you a question as a teacher. Can you, like, if you could define yourself as a teacher, can you define what your beliefs are and where you feel more comfortable at when you're teaching?
I think
I put you on the spot.
I wasn't expecting that one.
I know. I know.
Okay. I think that. First of all, there's no right or wrong, and
Agree.
I think as everything in life, there there should be a balance. So some things you have to be the teacher and the one in charge, and some
Mm-hmm.
things just let them do it. Let them
Mm-hmm.
understand what they know and how to get to a different point. But you have to be also the one showing them where to go and
Mm-hmm.
where they have to be, what they need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you just stick to one methodology, it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be too easy for everyone, but then you're not giving everyone the chance to learn because we don't learn the same way. We're all different. So for some people, a flipped classroom, amazing. Wow, I'm awesome. I learn everything, and when I go to the class, I can just go and discuss the
Mm-hmm.
things that I didn't really understand, or I can transfer and blah, blah, blah. But for some people, they need someone telling them, teaching them.
Yep.
So I think as teachers, we need to know like the more the merrier, the more the better.
Yes.
So we can also adapt. And schools should think the same way, I think, because if they are too strict about just following one methodology, just using one uh, way of
Approach. Yep.
teaching,
Mm-hmm.
that is not fair on
Mm-hmm.
learners and teachers as well.
Yes, that's true.
So
I like it.
that's my view. What about you?
I like to think that I am the ugly duckling everywhere I go. So it's like I had the chance to work here in the US in schools that are constructivists and schools that do exactly what I believe in education. But I made my mission to be in the public school system because I believe that I can be someone different in those children's lives.
Okay.
And this became something very clear for me. Like, um, when you choose to take your child to a private school, and it's not just a choice, right? It's a privilege and it's like having the means for it. You choose what you can afford and what you believe is the best for your child already. So then you are choosing it and you are putting them there. When your child goes to public school, you don't have that choice.
Hmm.
And most of the time, it's not your choice to put them there. It's what you can give them at that
Hmm.
moment. And if I can be the teacher that is there in a very traditional system, even though they are thinking about different approaches, even though they are updating and they are choosing curriculums that are more inclusive, that are taking into consideration cultural experiences and different nationalities, I think the public schools or the Department of Education, they do the hard work on trying to make sure that they are bringing what is updated to the classroom. But it's more difficult to control it if you have like things that you don't know in the classroom or what's happening in the classroom. So it's easier to go to a more traditional pathway where
Controlled.
you know exactly what the teacher is teaching and you know exactly the basic outcome. So I like to be the teacher that is, yes, I am going to follow what you're telling me to do, but I'm going to try to reach this child in a different way. I'm going
Hmm.
to use all this background knowledge that I have to make sure that I'm going to bring, like those 3% of your class that don't even want to be there, or I want to get like my high flyers and I'm going to show them that they can actually fly very high. So
Hmm.
I'm like, I want to be the difference there, and I want to connect with the children there, even though I have to follow a
Whatever it is.
structure,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's like and everywhere I go, I think like I try to get whatever information, what the positives are. And I think that's one thing that made me move so much, like from one school to the other, is the fact that like I don't like to be complaining about a place. Like I think that if I start complaining about a place, it's because I do not believe in there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not the problem of the institution itself. It's my problem. Like I don't fit in that place anymore, or because I have outgrown it, or it's because I don't know, it's just not, I don't have the space to be what I want to be. So I think every time that I start complaining and I feel that it's not where I am, then I get everything that I learned from that place and I try to find something where I'm going to be able to incorporate that,
Mm-hmm.
or something that is different, that is challenging. And I think the public education for me here, it means that. It means like using all this experience that I have with student centered and all the different approaches and all the different like theories that I have learned throughout my life, and bringing this to the classroom in a very structured environment,
Mm-hmm.
in a
Yeah.
very like defined environment.
Yeah.
So that's how I like to think of myself, I guess.
Okay, now we want to know about you. You there.
Hmm.
You that are listening to these two crazy ladies talking a lot about different things. What is your experience and what defines you as a teacher? And what is the best way that you can make your students learn? Because there's also this thinking. Sometimes I tell my students that I'm not here to teach you things, I'm here to help you learn things. And the first time I say it, they go like, huh? But then they understand why. They realize that I'm just there to help them, to guide them.
Yes.
And if if I go with that thinking, my
Hmm.
intention is going to be different, regardless of the philosophy, the approach, the methodology that is being used,
Yep.
right? But I think that's it. That's enough.
Yes, that's perfect. That was great.
And we'll see you next time.
Yes, stay tuned and please leave the comments there.
Yes, please. Bye.
Bye bye.